So welcome everyone again. Officially, this is our last night of the Lenten series, and it is Do You Renounce Satan and All His or Her Empty Promises? Very provocative. That's why we invite Maestro Visco. He is provocative and educative and fun. And also, I think the great thing too, I want to say two things. One about Anthony, second to kind of summarize these talks is the first is that I think what a lot of us love about him is that, sure, some of this deals in principles, and sort of it's the teaching style. But this, Anthony is learned this too. Not just he references the books, but also from doing it, from knowing the art. So I find that very valuable. The second thing I would just say this is that this Lenten series, a lot of it's been Genesis based. As at the Easter Vigil, we return from creation and from the beginning of creation all the way to the new creation, which is the Paschal mystery. So we had first light and shadow, light and shade, and how not only is that a key distinction in creation, but it's reflected in art throughout. Then we look at mankind. We looked both at the human body, this gift of God, which Christ makes into an offering for sin, and portrayals of the human body. The difference between nudity and nakedness, the shame of Adam and Eve, but also the redemption in Christ. And then we also talked at Image and Likeness about how we as saints, we are saints in the making, we pray, but even the saints who have finished their life course, how they restore the likeness, image and likeness of God. And that has brought up to my mind not only sort of Easter Vigil basic Genesis meditations, but also Anthony's been tying those to really key principles in art. I want to say that, so we have recorded these, and we will just soon after this is done, we will be sharing the playlist. Actually, this is great. This will be on YouTube playlist, Anthony's 10th recorded Zoom class. And so he's creating, I think, quite a shareable portfolio that anybody that missed can catch up, or anybody that wasn't here at all, this could be shared with them. So we're excited to finish this series, and with also part of the baptismal promises, 3 times those to be baptized and those already baptized. When we renew these promises, 3 times we reject and renounce Satan, who is a factor in our world. Just look around. And then we 3 times profess faith in God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So I will let Anthony take off. I'll probably interject in an annoying manner to have him clarify if I'm confused, but usually it's been smooth sailing. And we're happy to have this at the start of Holy Week as we get in the Gospels this week. The traps set for Jesus, the betrayal, it really starts to come with force until we have Spy Wednesday soon, where Judas is looking for a way to betray him. Satan enters Judas. It's not good, but it is all, like all things, I want to just say this, all evil, all spiritual evil, even those creatures of God, the fallen angels, they are God's creatures, made also in his image and likeness, although they have fallen. It is still all under God's plan and providence. Anything they do is by permission, and also to test us, to create a drama in which our sanctity is worked out. I want to give one story, then we'll start with Anthony. I talked to, when I was in seminary, we had, as a visiting priest, a long-time exorcist come from Georgetown, and he talked to us about a variety of things and exorcism and the details. And he said one thing I found so thought-provoking. He said, at first I was very much afraid in this kind of work. But after a long time and all of the bells and whistles and scares and all of the things that can happen in this kind of work, and I don't want to go into those details and give demons all this credit. They make a lot of noise, or different languages, or temperature, or this or that, whatever. But he said that his main emotion changed from fear to pity to sadness, that he was coming into close contact in his work with real creatures of God who had made their final choice, and they were confirmed in that. And so evil isn't something, it's not something to be afraid of mostly. It's actually, as Christ says, Do not, he says there's a proper fear. Fear not those who can kill the body, but those who can bring both body and soul to the Gehenna. There's a proper fear. But the primary response towards evil is pity. There's this sort of sadness that God's creatures should fall at all. And I think that's the real right response of Christians, a proper sadness for our own sins, for even the things that tempt us. So, Anthony, you take off from here. You've done much preparation. I'm done. I'll be with you all in this viewing, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you, Father Tim, and thank you all who have participated in this Lenten series here. I've really learned a lot doing it, so I want you all to know that this has been in the making for quite a while with me as well. One of the things that inspired me to do this talk was, of course, all the artwork I've seen in art history and in churches, but however not here. I have to say, one of the things that made me want to do this is the fact that we're not showing the demonic in any contemporary church art. What does that say, as if it doesn't exist? We don't show any combat. We don't show any victory over it. We don't even show it at all. So I think we as artists and faithful could maybe be a little concerned about that. How do we combat something that we're saying just isn't there anymore? In the beginning of most churches, and at least up until the 19th century, different portrayals of the demonic, whether it was for exorcism or tempting in the desert, and all these different scenes were portrayed somewhere. The most common throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and even somewhat into the Counter-Reformation, was the east wall having the Last Judgment. So as a reminder on your exit that this could happen at any time. Be prepared for the four last things of death, judgment, salvation, heaven, hell. These were very important images and things that were taken very, very seriously by both faithful and artists. So without doubt, the demonic had to be portrayed in some fashion. But a lot of times it was simply this creature, all different forms, as you can see. So one's got a bishop mitre, usually naked in the sense of not nude, but naked, to say this is nuditas criminalis, which we went over in one of the talks. And the elect are clothed and with halos. Here's another great example. If you notice at the bottom there, a lot of these demonic characters have two faces, one above and one below. So there's always this sense of duplicity in these creations that are made. A lot of times they are as silhouette, let me go back there, sorry. As silhouette as possible. Again, as sort of a symbol for no light whatsoever, none whatsoever. So sometimes they are simply just silhouettes. But what I found interesting was that no matter how they're depicted, whether it's silhouette or color, like we see in the Signorelli here, where he does the deformity or whatever we want to call it, not necessarily with wings and horns, but with drastic color changes. And as if this is not normal, this is not human, and this is not whatever we want to call it, but certainly not image and likeness of God. And we can start to see different types of forms, even different kinds of muscles and joints are going on there in the Signorelli. But before I know we started with Genesis and creation, but we kind of have to go a little bit forward to Book of Revelations, and how did the satanic or the evil one or the serpent or the fallen angel get into the garden to begin with. Certainly wasn't made by God. Like Father said earlier, it was permitted, but not made by. So in Revelations, God sees Satan fall from heaven and talks about it to a great length and says it's because of when God presented this new creation, Adam, to the angels. Some of them, in particular, Lucifer said, I will not serve. He felt that Adam was below angels, and therefore this is not worthy of serving. And others followed. They are considered the fallen angels and became a force. Now, this gets depicted in many different cultures. This is a Turkish icon of we will not serve, where all the angels are bowing except for those like the one you see in the right there. That is Satan. It's always a darker figure. This isn't anything, again, this is not anything about race as much as it doesn't receive light. Here's another non serviam illustration. And here, of course, is Dorés. We can also liken this to the first talk on the separation of light and dark on the first day. And this is Chagall's interpretation, which I find very interesting. As a Jew, he puts in the woman clothed in the sun, the fall of Lucifer, and the crucifix all in one, and of course the Torah. Another Doré. This, by the way, is George Nista, who's been a sculptor here for quite a while, and this is his fallen angel. But one of the things that happens for sure is that however it's depicted, there's always some sort of mix. It's not necessarily, of course, you know, if you say to someone, well, you know, who believes in somebody dressed up in a red cape and little red horns and a tail? No one. Again, these are angelic forms. They are part of this invisible world. So just like the angels that we try to make visible when we're doing the archangels, we try to do whatever as artists to make these fallen angels visible as well. The Talmud says that Lucifer, and the reason why he got his name is light carrier, had a skin that was very much like the scales of the snake, and it shined and had a very high polish and sheen to it. This is not necessarily armor, this is his skin. But the apocalyptic views that John sees and records lets us know just how it got into the garden. This wonderful Bosch painting has both the woman clothed in the sun and this demonic little creature down here. Bach was phenomenal for doing these inventions. And so here's the woman clothed in the sun. And we have many different interpretations of this, and always crushing evil. This again is what I was saying a moment ago about we're not seeing the victory over evil, even the battle, other than maybe over-the-counter St. Michael statue. And we know the battle continues. It's not over. And most often, as you can see, it's either this dragon type form or the serpent wrapped around the globe. But what fascinated me is how much these demonic forms interpreted by artists change and why. And what I can figure out here is that at creation, The devil's always trans. By that I mean it's always trans between animal and human. Uh, it's cross species. It's cross gender. Like this little creature down here that Bosch does. Very short arms. He can't write. He has glasses. He will annoy. He will take a poker and knock over the ink. There is a demonic force for everything, even an imp, just harassing spirits. And for ages, these were depicted in these different paintings, whereby you could tell that this was the one that stops you from writing well or interrupts you. It can't see, and it can't. You can see the little arms waving in the air there. Again, part bug, part lizard. I don't know, but a complete invention, and that says this is what I do. Of course, the cross species comes, and it's intentional, not to make it look weird or different. It's just that in creation, God made it very clear that we were to multiply species with the same. So there's no cross species here, and that's what's so clear in this painting. Lion, lioness, etc., on and on, male, female, peacock. So every creature has its like mate. There's no crossing over. So it was important for the artists to show that when we're dealing with any sort of demonic imagery, it should combine both genders and species. So we see it quite frequently, most often in the temptation.
Anthony, just to ask a quick question while we're looking through this. So it seems to me like you've said three things to my mind is that this sort of, all this strange imagery of demons is to somewhat show that it doesn't fit in the normal animal kingdom or the human world. It's something other, strange, but the qualities used to depict it can show some activity, how it bothers, how it disturbs, so the analogous things. And also its likeness to man or woman or animal shows that it kind of has an influence on those things.
Oh, especially in the garden, it is to deceive. It is absolutely designed so that you can't really tell. And that is always the work
deceptive, right?
Yes,
right.
It's to deceive. So it could have a human face and could just simply be, well, gee, this is a creature we're not familiar with. And it's telling me all good things. So if we see this sort of motif repeat, the reasons are because, yes, it is cross species and cross gender, because it doesn't fit in with the will of God, essentially. And then, of course, to be deceptive. After the expulsion, of course, we see that this doesn't stop here, and the depiction becomes more and more exaggerated, where there's not even two of their own kind in a lot of these paintings. No two devils even look alike. Again, this crossover between species here. A lot of times it is simply, in early works, just a big mouth that devours everything. It's almost like the demonic is hell itself. and is the gate to hell. You enter its body. And you can see that in a lot of those earlier versions of the elect and the damned, where it is definitely consuming every one that, or everything that comes in its path. This is also, again, cross-cultural. I've found out that the idea of the demonic being cross-gender, cross-species is played out in many different languages. This is from, again, from the Islamic series, where the non serviam comes into play. This is probably one of the worst that we can imagine, but as we know, the demonic can take on many forms and deceive us as much as possible. I think that this portrayal here, done by Vivrini, who does incredibly beautiful sacred art, reminded me tremendously of what Mel Gibson did in the film The Passion, where the demonic takes on the role of the mother of God. And I thought, boy, maybe he perhaps saw this painting or something, but because a lot of times some of these directors and film producers are looking at art in particular and this kind of thing, but even if he didn't, he got the idea. And anyone who saw it, we know how disturbing it was to see this. A lot of times there's these wonderful combinations where we have the demonic. Now, when we see this sort of thing where we see the demonic and the skeleton, and on the right here we see the demonic and the skeleton, and Christ putting death and the devil to death. We also see these allegories of warnings. Here we have death and the devil again on the left, chasing Adam, and then St. John the Baptist telling Adam of the crucified Christ and the resurrection, Lamb of God. We see the snake escaping here, and again the skeleton on the bottom as the lamb stomps on the skeleton. I really do somehow wish that some of this could be restated and represented in some of our modern churches or contemporary churches. This is another common, not so common, but a familiar allegory that was prominent for a while, where we have the law on one side being presented to Moses and grace on the other side. Through the death and resurrection. We have sin on one side with Adam and Eve and the serpent, and then we have the Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, being presented again with John the Baptist on one side. There's death on the bottom there, and the victory over death on the other with Christ. So very compounded, but quite beautiful. And then, of course, the comparison between the brazen serpent on one side and Christ on the other. Same thing, different artist. Moses, when I think of the brazen cross or the brazen serpent, as we know, when Moses went to Mount Sinai to receive the law, the Israelites fell into idolatry and made the golden calf. Now, a lot of times these interpretations are, I find, very different when it comes to the serpent. In the earlier traditions, this is Poussin's adoration of the worshiping of the golden calf. Beautiful painting. The golden calf, the serpent was more like a dragon in these earlier interpretations, not quite clearly a serpent, but some sort of lizard type form. Here we can see it again. And again, if to make reference to the lecture on the nude and the naked, if you notice, those bitten and those dying or dead have been stripped. This is the Rubens version. So the serpent, of course, means sin crucified. Which gets us to where we are now, Passover, and the angel of death. And in the interpretations, the angel of death is not a bad thing. Again, it deals with, this is, of course, the curse that Pharaoh brought onto himself. But even in Judaism, the angel of death is not seen as this horrific character, or even a devil. Of course, we know St. Francis called it sister death. The comparisons between Christ crucified and the brazen serpent, again, are things that I would love to see redressed somehow in contemporary church art, if possible, because they both are so close to the idea of sin being crucified, that Christ took on sin and killed it in the crucifixion. Here's another great interpretation. This is a very interesting combination of the brazen serpent and the transfiguration. And the last talk we had, we talked about transfiguration. Again, two upper lower panels, the one by Raffaello, his last painting. But what I found fascinating about this one was on the right, it has the symbols of the Passion. Here's the lower portion with the brazen serpent, Moses and Aaron. The upper with signs and symbols, or symbols rather, of Christ's crucifixion, including the chalice above.
Anthony, a quick interjection, Father Tim here again.
Yeah.
Are you planning on addressing Moses's horns?
Oh, as rays of light, this, if you look closely, these are rays of light.
Because that's something I know many people probably know, but I think there was a mistranslation of Jerome in the Latin Saint Jerome, and it was a mistranslation that Moses came out of the tabernacle with rays of light. His face was illumined, but it's been mistranslated as with horns. So, like,
Yeah.
Anyway, a lot of art.
I didn't know that of the mistranslation, other than I didn't know how much of it was tradition, how much of it was whatever. But thanks for that part. I know Michelangelo carved it that way.
Just to clarify why he looks, it's for very different reasons than demons. Just saying.
Oh God, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you can see how close these images are in terms of symbols of the crucifixion. I thought it was an ingenious way of putting all these things together. And of course, the one of the main characters that, again, with the permission of God, who was attacked by demons is Job. And here again, we have these early illustrations. This one's much more Baroque, but nevertheless, God giving permission to Job. Yes, you can test him, and he will be faithful. This is Blake's version of it. He's not describing the demonic as quite an ugly figure, which again goes back to the deceptive character of it and all the accusations of Job's friends. We spoke about this kind of work on the Light and Shade lecture about tenebrism and what it introduces to imagery in terms of darkness, those crepuscular moments, asking Job, "Are you sure you didn't do anything?" It really reminds me of some of these Christ of Good Friday morning sculptures that we occasionally see. We don't see too many of them anymore, where Christ is completely alone. Again, we did see some of this in Mel Gibson's production, where Christ is just being held captive alone. And of course, the Bonnat painting. I know a lot of artists don't like this one because it just says this is nude in the studio and there was nothing more to it, but I still appreciate it because it's also Job in prayer of supplication. This we don't see too much of, but it's Job being triumphant over being vindicated, and the demonic is at his feet. The temptations of Christ in the desert really take us back to the garden when we think about it, because they are the same offers being made to Christ as were being made to Adam and Eve, which is autonomy from the Father. We compare the difference between the garden and the desert and wonder, how much these temptations must have been. Here, Adam and Eve were in a garden where they had everything they wanted. Here is Christ in the desert, where he has nothing that he needs for his body or soul, in a sense, other than prayer. So his comforts are gone. The three different temptations. Again, here's the demonic done in sort of very low relief, as we say, quality of color or light, more silhouette. This is a Nicholas Roerich, who was an incredible Russian trained painter who got more involved with sort of a mystical aspect and visionary art, and lived his life out in the Himalayas. So just like in the garden, the temptation is the fruit, except here Satan is asking Christ to change rocks into bread. And again, another deceptive technique, which is Christ, the demonic appearing to Christ as a monk. Christ is tempted with suicide here when he's asked to throw himself down. It's a way of accept me, forget the Father, forget your inheritance. And again, Adam and Eve are asked the same things. But with a lie, you will not die. This is the Tissot's version of it. This is from the Gibirti doors. We don't see any temptation here, but we do see the angels coming to comfort Christ. And then, as we know, it is the opposite for Adam and Eve. The angels aren't comforting them, they expel them from the garden. So it's the entire story reversed or inverted. Now, our saints fall victim to it as well, of course. And again, we see the same artistic interpretations. Two faces in this one again, cross species, not human color. Saint Anthony in the desert. And it's not as if some of our more modern saints haven't talked about attack. I mean, we know Padre Pio talked about it a lot, and yet we don't see any sort of images of Padre Pio being attacked. He did, and he survived. How he fought them off, how he prayed. St. Catherine here. Again, the temptations of St. Anthony.
Now, Anthony, just a quick interjection too. I know you're probably named after Anthony of Padua or Anthony the Great. Who knows?
Anthony of Padua.
Right. We had done the reading for our All Saints Vigil 2 years ago from Anthony the Great, and it does describe in Athanasius's Life of Anthony the Great in his cave, it describes many creatures appearing, minions of the devil, attacking him. And then finally, there's this amazing scene, just to state a single quote, when Anthony actually yells out in the midst of battle like a warrior while he's being attacked physically, you know, if you're so powerful, Satan, why do you have to try to frighten me with so many different creatures, you know? And he battles. But then when the light of God shines into the cave and the creatures flee, he turns into a child almost and says to the Lord, where were you? I needed you. And he says, Anthony, I was watching you battle. It's this incredibly emotional. You could read that still and go online to see. It's towards the beginning of the Life of Anthony. It's right online. I just suggest that as not only as rich in kind of symbolism, but it's incredible early account of spiritual warfare. It's amazing.
Well, you know, Father Tim, thank you for that, because it also illustrates to I think artists who may be listening or whatever, who are interested in doing this sort of thing, just how much these artists knew. Right. Maybe it was read to them. Who knows? Well, I don't know if
and there's a great comparison as well between, in Anthony's language, between all the show. That's what we say. Do you reject Satan and all of his empty promises, the promises of happiness, promises of satisfaction and sin? Then he says, and second, all of his empty show. And Anthony's saying all this scary, empty, dangerous show versus something as simple as the Eucharist.
Yes.
God doesn't need to do that. Doesn't need to exaggerate like the devil exaggerates to Eve, doesn't need to frighten, doesn't, you know.
Here's another interpretation by Michelangelo, this painting of the attacks on St. Anthony, and the others on St. Jerome with lust, these two women. This is St. Anthony of Padua, but of course the difference is tremendous between the two attacks. And this is St. Thomas Aquinas being attacked by the demons of lust. St. Bernard. Exorcism and the depiction of exorcism also sort of follows the same imagery in the sense of this creature comes out of someone's mouth. You can see the others on the side there as the pigs are being thrown off the cliff, going into the pigs. I don't know how that other little image got there, but anyway, here's another Asian interpretation of the release of the demon from someone possessed. Again, a smaller creature without much modeling on it. If you look at the relief quality, what I call relief quality, in something like the drapery on Christ, as opposed to the almost silhouette version of the demonic. And smaller intentionally, to show that you are not that big here. Tissot always does it as in any interpretation of the demonic or the crazy, whatever he wants to call it, the possessed, he does them naked, which is very unusual for him because he never, ever, ever shows anything like that. Only in this case. Here's Christ healing a man's son possessed. And this is the creature that comes out and says, I am Legion. And this is how Tissot interprets it. And again, we spoke about this last week in the Transfiguration, and how exorcism is transforming for sure, and how the demoniac child has one eye toward the Transfiguration and the other eye downward. This split between the two worlds. And of course, Our Lady assists tremendously in combating the demonic for us, with us, under her mantle. We are saved, safe. Saint Joseph and Saint Patrick here. Terror of demons. The saints also assist in exorcism. Again, here's Our Lady and Saint John. Now, of course, this is tradition. It's not, some might say, well, that's not scriptural. No, but it is tradition. Here's another two-faced demon. Saint Bernard again. This is one of the panels from the Doors of San Zeno, and this is San Zeno exorcising a woman. These are on the Cathedral of Verona, some of the earliest bronze doors. And Saint Francis casting out the demons of Arezzo.
Anthony, a good quick question that was put in
Sure.
the chat while we're on this. A lot of times in exorcisms, this is asked by Marge Zilla. Why oftentimes do you think they're shown leaving by the mouth?
I think it's because it is an opening that we understand. It's an opening that we don't have to change in order to do it. It's not surgery. We don't have to open the body to take anything out.
I think that's right. It also seems to me maybe the instinct there is that a lot of times in exorcisms, the demon will use the person's voice. They possess their body to speak.
Well,
And
it also makes,
when the person's natural voice returns, it's a sign of having left.
there's that, but there's also, I think, and I can't say this for sure, but I always think of it as a reference to, if there is a reference to scripture, it's to Christ telling the Pharisees, it's not what you put in your mouth, it's what comes out of it that's bad. And
Very
about
well said. Yes.
yeah, Saint Bernard again. In this case, it's not coming out of his mouth, but it's getting beaten out of him. I'm sorry, I think I showed that one again. Now this triad between sin, death, and the devil becomes a major theme as well, where they're almost inseparable. I think another factor, what we haven't discussed yet, is the portrayal of the Antichrist. And out of all of them I've ever seen, I would have to say that Luca Signorelli gets the prize. This kind of creative invention here of making it look like it's the hand of Christ when it's really the hand of the devil slipping through there. It's quite amazing. Now, Bosch does it again with his adoration of the Magi. When we look in the stable there, the Antichrist is there at the birth of Christ, prepared. That the idea of temptation never goes away. We're never released from it. And Bosch does another wonderful painting. This is the 7 deadly sins together. But he does this wheel. And of course, in the center of it, he's got the Christ of Holy Saturday as these Christ of Holy Saturday plus the 4 last things in the corners there that aren't shown here. But pride, this is just amazing. This woman's got this crazy lampshade or whatever on her head, and she still thinks she's beautiful no matter what. And the devil's helping her adjust the mirror and even imitating her with her nice lace veil there. Sloth being handed the rosary and refusing. Greed, gluttony, and it goes on, this wheel that goes around. I can't see the reading on the bottom of this. Somebody read that for me.
Envy.
Envy, yeah.
There's envy.
Anger.
Here's wrath, ira.
Yeah. There's jealousy. And the 4 last things: judgment, death, heaven or hell. There's a monk. Again, I can't get this toolbar to diminish because I really need to. Anyway, he decided that there are these various categories of demonic and really puts them in quite an order here, all having their own specific role. Not that they're not interchangeable, but one of them in particular, and I guess because he wrote so much, was what we call the devil, the printer's devil. And the printer's devil would make you make mistakes, spill your ink, put type upside down, all sorts of things. And excuse me, I was thinking about that, and I thought, well, gee, that's interesting, because I don't think it's gone away. It's now called presumptive spell. I call it auto spelling in the computer. That little imp is alive and well and living in Microsoft. However, he also came up with a brilliant idea of, for every demon, there is a saint who's opposed to it. So for pride, he chose Pride is opposed by St. Francis of Assisi in his humility. The spirit of heresy by St. Peter. I found this sort of pairing very ingenious, that Peter denies Christ, so of course, and mourns it. But also he is the spirit that opposes, he is the saint that opposes the spirit of heresy. John the Baptist opposes the spirit of wantonness. Barnabas opposes the spirit of suicide. He replaced Judas. Saint Bartholomew opposes the spirit of sloth. And in this painting, you can see how he's chained the spirit below him. Saint Dominic opposes the spirit of impatience. And Father Tim aided me in terms of, the patience of Saint Dominic in waiting so long for so many things, but all came. Saint Bernard opposing the spirit of impurity. Saint Stephen opposing the spirit of hatred. But as I said, temptation doesn't leave. We know this. The Dominican Savonarola in his cell was so aware of the temptation that's just out in the world that in his cell he had forged this face of a demon, so that every time he opened to look outside, he was aware that it's out there. It's out there. Be aware. Have your lamps lit, dressed, and ready for action. And again, it's not a matter of fear, it's a matter of preparedness. There's been many, many illustrations of this that really would help the faithful in terms of something even like a faithful confession, and how the demonic can even try to get you to give a bad confession. But these three things of death, sin, and the devil, and this combination we see played over in history for quite a while. I don't know quite what happened, and they fight, and it's usually sin in the middle trying to stop an argument between death and the devil. The reason being, if you kill the devil, I don't have a job. It's very interesting. We'll all be out of business. Again, the four last things. The use of the ladder is something that, of course, we don't see anymore at all. But nevertheless, it's quite real. This climbing to another life, to heaven, always upward. But comes Wednesday, and we realize that Satan enters Judas. On Spy Wednesday. Again, here's the demonic being portrayed as a smaller, dark silhouette type figure. And the kiss of Judas, or the kiss of Satan to Judas, turns into the kiss of betrayal. I know I showed this once before when we were doing the light and dark lecture, that Judas is portrayed as simply a black silhouette here at the Last Supper. And you can see in the cast shadow, which would be impossible because the light is between them, but there's another light behind them that casts this demonic shadow on the wall of the upper room. And Judas leaves the upper room to do what he has to do. Here's one of the few. Marge asked earlier about the demonic coming out of the mouth. This is the only one where I've ever found it being cut out of the soul of Judas, being cut out of his body and taken to hell. Of course, Friday morning, we have Christ before Pilate. This is another sort of test or question where Pilate says, what is truth? And when we think about where that has gotten us, that question is still with us because, and especially we see this after modernism, and by that I don't mean the 1950s stuff. I really mean more when even Benedetto Croce says, the philosopher, the difference between someone like Croce and Aquinas is that beauty, truth, and goodness come from God. And the modern philosopher would say, no, beauty is man-made. Nature's just wild, and you can't really, you can say it's nice, but that's not created beauty. Only man can create beauty. Well, saying something like what is truth then follows the other triad of truth then is a matter of opinion, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and good and evil are equal. And again, these are things that it's an ongoing sort of combat that we have. But here's Christ climbing the ladder to crucifixion. Again, this ladder comes into play in some of these paintings. This I've only seen one image of, and it's Christ carrying death, sin, and the devil to be nailed on the cross with him. This is 1547. It's an incredible image that, you know, I would ask artists, please try to update these things and represent them. They're wonderful things and we need them. And we know the weight of the crosses with, again, when we think of Christ carrying sin, death, and the devil to the cross with him. All right, here's a wonderful triptych of the devil there at the crucifixion with a saint in prayer being offered the crown, but you know, the devil still wants to offer you something else.
Well, you have to do it every time.
Now we have this painting in Philadelphia, and as you can see, there's a the use of the skull at the foot of the cross has quite a few meanings here. One is that it took place scripturally at the place of the skull, Golgotha. And here we have the skull right underneath the crucifix itself. Golgotha does have this sort of demonic type face and rock, as we can see here. And perhaps that's where it was called the place of the skull. But there's another part of the Golden Legend, is that the skull was there because that's where Eden was. And that when Adam died, a seed from the tree of good and evil was placed in his head, in his mouth. And the wood for the cross came out of his skull, grew out of his skull. This is from Piero della Francesca's The Finding of the True Cross. So he includes the death of Adam in that arrangement. Here is angel escorting Adam to limbo. And of course, we see the skull again used in contemplation with Mary Magdalene and Saint Jerome. Contemplation of mortality, Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Clare, or excuse me, Saint Margaret of Corona, and Saint Teresa. But it's the Christ of Holy Saturday that we will be approaching after the crucifixion, of course. And a lot of times, Christ of Holy Saturday is simply depicted as alone, or with angels in this case. This is the tabernacle door from San Marco that Fra Angelico did. The Christ of Holy Saturday, of course, I had shown other ones where he's completely laying flat, but this Christ of Holy Saturday is both asleep, as it were. Again, here assisted by angels, or Christ of Holy Saturday is also with other saints. These paintings that have more than one image of Christ's blood being shed on one end, and then already resurrected, killing death, sin, and the devil. To say they died with me. They died with me. And you see again, the same sort of imagery continues with the mixed gender, mixed species. Christ showing those in limbo that he's been crucified. These images where, you know, they really, I like the combinations because they do intend to transcend time and space, where you will have that, we're thinking too chronologically a lot of times when we do sacred art. Here's devil making one more attempt to kill. And of course, it is the part of the Christ of Holy Saturday. We can have him completely in the tomb. We can have him sitting up as Christ of Holy Saturday in those other illustrations, or we can have the harrowing of hell, which is probably one of the most important parts of Holy Saturday. As much as I love Raphael, I find this one a little too. I really like the Christ that yanks them out of limbo and frees them. And of course, this Holy Saturday, we wait the Holy Saturday Vigil and the lighting of the Paschal candle, and as we approach the reading of the Exultet. So we can be reminded that, you know, we have a faith that's based on a virgin birth and an empty tomb. These are different illustrations from the Exultet. And the promise of a Redeemer, O felix culpa, O happy fault of Adam. For without that fault, we would have not been given such an incredible Redeemer. Here we have Our Lady with Eve, showing Eve the fruit of her womb. And of course, the new Eve, the birth of the church, from as Eve is pulled from the side of Adam, the new church, or the church is pulled from the side of Christ. And here Our Lady offers Eucharist on one side, while Eve offers the fruit of the tree of good and evil on the other. This is a very beautiful, long Middle Ages of scroll from hand painted scroll of the Exultet. This, I think, is this is by Pietro Annigoni, one of the best resurrection paintings I know of, fresco rather. But as we were saying earlier, the fruit of this is the Blessed Sacrament. These when we think about the asking Christ to turn stone into bread, he turns his body into living bread, and the promise of eternity. So the promises are fulfilled. The questions are still there when we say, do you renounce Satan and his empty promises? Of course, because those promises will always be empty, and the Eucharist will always be our food to eternity. And with that, I will end this talk, and I appreciate your patience and your participation here. And we'll turn it over to any questions, any answers too, please.
Thank you again, Anthony. We'll give you a round of applause for the series, as well as, it's funny, we got that incredible muted applause. So we'll open it for questions. I just wanted to say one thing in response, and this is a note that Michael Anastasia just put about being under Mary's mantle. I do think, as you rightly say, that there isn't a lot of demonic imagery in our church. Calling this stuff to mind. It is true that sort of the more machine and mass-produced stuff, I mean, the common thing we see is the serpent at Mary's feet all over the place. So at least, even though it's not the greatest quality, that image is common and still around. And I always think, too, that Marian thing, as you ended with, is so key, because she, above all defenses against anything evil, in Mel Gibson's The Passion and in other sacred art and in real life, she is powerful defense. I even think of the Dominicans at our very foundations. So St. Dominic died in 1221. He was replaced by a very young friar called Blessed Jordan of Saxony. And in Bologna, where he was living, there was a problem with a friar who was under the case of possession. Eventually that friar was freed, but in honor of that and all these prayers to Mary, etc., the Dominicans then introduced, which has become very common now throughout the church's prayers, that at night prayer at Compline, once night prayer is finished right before bed, we sing the Salve Regina. We sing some Marian antiphon. So the origins of that come from the Dominicans dealing with real spiritual evil and knowing that Mary has this sort of this role to play. So in art and in prayer, and it's been tried and true. So that's I think it's a great note to end on. Like every papal encyclical, so this series ends on the comment on our Virgin Mother. What else too? Anybody? So I want to read this comment from Susan to start us off and open up. What is the origin of the image of horns on the devil? General thoughts there, Maestro?
I would say again, it's the cross species idea, horns and a tail.
And usually too, calling us from our being in the image and likeness of God, calling us more towards tempting us towards our animal nature,
Yes,
which is real,
exactly.
but drawing us away from the image and likeness. Yeah. Anybody else too, please chime in, and it can be comments on this or on the whole series, since we're wrapping it up. A lot of people are just saying in the chat, thank you, and have a blessed Triduum and blessed Holy Week. So there's a lot of love via the chat. Just letting you know, I won't read everything. Anybody else too, you can unmute yourself and add a comment or question. We have some time.
Yeah, Father Tim, Jim McElwain, question that I have, and not so much about depiction of Satan, but when it comes to angels, the good angels, the star angels like Gabriel, and even the angel during Passover, they're kind of masculine figures, but very often in these paintings you have these cherubic type figures that are androgynous. They have certain female characteristics. They also have some male characteristics. I'm just wondering if you could talk about.
Yeah, or also infants. The whole idea of an infant angel. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. Anthony, what say you?
Well, we have 9 choirs, and they all have specific looks to them. A lot of times the real cherubs are just heads with wings. They don't have bodies. Seraphim have 6 wings with eyes. So again, we've gotten away from that kind of depiction in recent history, where we're not being clear on this type of angel and what are its attributes. There is a period, and we can see it even in Giotto, where the lower part is just draped. Angels don't have feet; they don't touch the ground. So that was a sort of visual metaphor for that interpretation.
I wonder too if there's some creativity allowed because angels don't actually have bodies; they're invisible creatures. There's this variety
Exactly.
of creative expression about the innocence of children or the strength of men or the help and the care of women. There's yeah, they do seem to appear in the scriptures as adults at least.
Mm.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah. So it talks about a lot of different things. It talks about what they're capable of knowing or not knowing or seeing or doing. So if we're saying that, you know, because we have to translate them in a visual manner, that well, if they're going to assist somebody in this, they've got to be large enough to do that. So of course, Saint Michael is taken on that way, and Saint Gabriel, of course, and Saint Raphael. Saint Raphael is not portrayed with wings in most of the paintings because of that, because Tobias doesn't know he's an angel.
Anthony, Caroline added in that there, I think she remembers at Villanova, there was a mural of people going to hell in modern dress and it was painted over to try. And I remember that that's still in mosaic at the National Shrine in DC. I mean, there's two comments there, erasing the possibility of that, but also modern dress and, you know, any comments.
I don't have a problem with modern dress in a lot of cases. I really don't. And I just think as long as it's painted well and done well, you know, I also think there is a thing about how drapery can be somewhat anonymous at times too. It can be done in a way where it doesn't really say so much about fashion, you know, and because sometimes when I remember in the Bryn Mawr Commission, there was a change in pastors, which can happen during these things. And the new pastor wanted everything done in modern clothes. And here was the Sermon of the Mount and the baptism of Christ. And it was 1988. And so I told him, I said, had you done this 10 years ago, you'd be looking at bell bottoms and platform shoes at the baptism of Christ. Is that what you want? And of course he said, no. So but the figures were draped. And so there's a difference between, again, doing it in zeitgeist fashion, where you got to do contemporary clothing. There's a way of doing contemporary clothing I think in a fashion and in a manner and style that doesn't really mark the time so much.
Let's call on to Shirley. Mickey Magaletta, you have your hand raised. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask you, Anthony, were most of these paintings done in medieval and early Renaissance?
All of it. There are some very early ones, and there's some. The Antigone was done, I'd probably say, in the 70s. So they run for quite a few centuries there.
Anthony,
Thank
complimentary
you.
to that.
I'm sorry, not to interrupt. George Nista is alive and well and here tonight. He's the one that did the one fallen angel sculpture I showed.
Anthony, this complimentary question Lloyd Williams asked in the chat. When exactly did this, can you, to your knowledge, pinpoint when this went out of fashion? And are there any recent works, we saw George's, are there any recent works where they've tried to revive it?
None that I know of, absolutely. Okay. I think so much of it, again, part of it is our churches get built. A lot of the art is over the counter art. And now we're facing a situation where because of closures and et cetera, we're reusing some of the nice marble sculptures and all from the 19th century. So it's getting commission work is tough for churches, but as I say, I don't think you have to wait. If you have this and you want to express it somewhere, somehow, in some way. Don't wait. George Nista certainly didn't wait for a commission to do his sculpture. So I
What
think a
about you,
lot
Anthony?
of
Last lecture, you had mentioned in your childhood reviewing like classical art, and since Vatican II, there's been some change. I mean, but you don't recall this at all in America in any age where this was emphasized, the demonic in art.
no, not at all. I mean, in every church that I grew up with, like I said, other than the occasional Saint Michael Archangel or a statue of the Blessed Mother with their head on a snake, that's about it. But nothing about the struggle, nothing about the victory over in any way, or the continuing battle, or exorcism, or anything like that. And yet, like I said, Padre Pio, there's no painting, drawing, relief, or anything of his combat with the satanic, and yet we know he had it.
And people talk about like that saint stories are popular about dealing with this. Movies have been Hollywood, etc. But it is interesting how it hasn't been in church art. Anyway, further comments or questions? Anyone? Well, we can all hang out and spend some time because it's the end of the series, but I guess you were just really clear, Maestro. I guess there's no.
Like I said, question. I'll take answers too. I don't necessarily want.
Or yeah, or other thoughts. Let's also just open it to
Answers.
all right. So this is what Lloyd also added. Are the movies merely exploitation? Maybe the movies are exploitation. Yeah, but I think also like,
Well, movies. It's interesting because I remember when The Exorcist came out. I wouldn't see it, and I still won't see it. It bothered me a great deal, and I noticed how much interest was not in exorcism, but the demonic. And we know for a fact that a lot of cults came up after that film. Ouija board sales went through the roof. So again, we have to be careful in displaying it so that it doesn't excite.
And as we speak, I had to move my car from street parking this evening from 2100 Spruce. I had to move it before 6 p.m., right before this talk, because M. Night Shyamalan, who I like many of his movies, but they're filming season 3 of whatever that Apple TV, what is it called?
I wouldn't know.
Well, it's very twisted. It's about an infant who is possessed, and it's like not watching it at all.
No.
But that's being filmed this evening, a block away from us here.
Nope.
Season 3.
No.
It's called what is it called? I have it. Servant. I don't know what that refers to. Servant. But anyway, things are. We can have an unhealthy fascination with evil, which is common these days, versus a healthy fascination with evil, which is that it's not always the paranormal, but it's the regular temptations we face. We give the devil too much credit when we make it weirder and weirder, and even exaggerate his exaggerations with our own twist on his twisting. Anyway, it's good to just deal with temptation and be honest about it and confess. Julia Palmer said, thank you and have a great series, Father Tim, Blessed Trim. A lot of other people just given their thanks. So
Wonderful.
if there are no further questions or comments, we have Eric Price real quick. Eric, finish it off, Eric. Pop the champagne bottle. Let's celebrate with this final question, although you're on mute. There you go.
Great. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. It was really great.
Oh, sure, Eric. Thanks for joining us all these weeks. I really appreciate it. And
thank you, Anthony.
Excuse me. Hi, Janet. How you doing?
Yes, I got in late. I had trouble getting in, but I got in and saw most of it. So I sure appreciate all of this. It's been very enlightening.
Well, let's do this. Let's continue and Janet, stay on, and everybody stay. We'll continue to visit if wanted, but we'll just kind of end this officially and say many blessings on this holy week, the holiest of weeks. And Christ is risen. I know I spoiled it. I said it earlier, but it's good to be with you. So we officially end here. Many blessings. And if you'd like to stay on and chat for a bit, we will. Okay, thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Father,
Yes.
Tim, for
Thank you.
It's
hosting us.
been